6 enemy MiGs on radar. I was alone, low on fuel, damaged wing, and I had to hold the line. They couldn't reach our boys on the ground. Not on my watch. The briefing room was dead silent that morning. What started as a routine patrol had just turned into something none of us expected. Lieutenant Parker, the colonel, said, pointing directly at me, "You'll fly alone on this one." I felt my stomach drop. At 28, I'd seen combat before, but never a solo mission this deep into contested airspace. The intelligence indicated a surprise attack was imminent on our forward operating base. They needed eyes in the sky immediately. The other jets were grounded for maintenance, and thunderstorms had delayed our reinforcements. It was just me, my F-16, and a promise to 200 soldiers who had no idea what was coming their way. I remember walking to my aircraft, the weight of responsibility pressing down harder than my flight gear. The crew chief gave me a knowing nod as I climbed into the cockpit. No words needed. We both knew the odds. The sun was barely cracking the horizon as I taxied down the runway, my mind racing through protocols, contingencies, and the faces of my squadron mates who'd be missing from this dance. The radio crackled with my call sign, followed by coordinates and a simple message, "Godspeed, Viper 1. As the afterburners kicked in and pushed me back into my seat, I whispered to myself, just another day at the office. But I knew better. The morning sky opened up before me as I reached cruising altitude, deceptively peaceful against what waited ahead. I checked my systems meticulously, fuel reserves, weapons status, communication links. Everything was operational, but the mission parameters kept echoing in my head. Observe only. Do not engage unless directly threatened. Maintain radio silence when possible. Easier said than done in a hornet's nest. I kept thinking about my family back home. My wife's last message, "Come back to us." 3 simple words that suddenly carried the weight of the world. I adjusted my oxygen mask and focused on the horizon. The border was coming up fast. The first hour was textbook flying, maintaining altitude, scanning patterns, staying vigilant. Then my threat detector lit up like a Christmas tree. Something was tracking me from below, and it wasn't supposed to be there. I initiated defensive measures, dropping to a lower altitude and changing course. That's when I spotted them, a forward observation post, completely off our intelligence maps, with surface-to-air capability. They'd seen me, and worse, they were alerting someone else. My heart rate spiked as I made the call. "Sierra Actual, this is Viper 1. About unexpected company down here." The response came through with static. "Be advised, multiple bogies launching from Sector 4. They're coming your way. What's your status?" I checked my fuel gauge and weapons systems before responding, ready to dance. The radar warning receiver started screaming first. 6 distinct signatures approaching fast from the east. MiG-29s flying in tight formation, already spreading out to encircle me. I hadn't even crossed the designated hot zone yet, which meant only one thing. They'd been waiting. Someone knew I was coming. I switched to combat mode, adrenaline sharpening every sense as I mentally ran through my options. Retreat wasn't viable. I'd lead them straight back to our vulnerable ground forces. Fighting was suicide against those odds. But there was a third option, something we practiced but rarely implemented, the ghost dance, using the terrain, clouds, and sun to become virtually invisible. Viper 1, be advised, you are outnumbered 6-1. Recommend immediate evasive action and return to base. The commander's voice was steady, but I could hear the concern. Negative, Sierra Actual. If I turn back now, they'll be all over our FOB within 20 minutes. Those boys on the ground won't know what hit them. There was a pause, then, understood, Viper 1. You're authorized to proceed at your discretion. The weight of those words hung in the air as I pushed my throttle forward. The G-forces pressed me into my seat as I climbed rapidly, setting up my first move. I needed altitude, speed, and most importantly, I needed them to underestimate me. I could see them now, silver predators against the blue, closing in with methodical precision. Their leader was good, maintaining optimal spacing, keeping his wingmen in supporting positions. These weren't rookies. I waited until the last possible moment before initiating a split-S maneuver, inverting the aircraft and diving toward the valley below. The sudden change in direction caught them off guard, buying me precious seconds. Two of them overshot, while the others adjusted course to follow. My altimeter spun rapidly as the ground rushed up to meet me. "Come on, baby," I whispered to my aircraft, pulling out the dive just above the treetops, feeling the frame shudder under the strain. The radio crackled with angry chatter. They were coordinating, try to box me in. I weaved through a narrow canyon, using the terrain to break their radar lock. One of them was persistent, matching my turns with impressive skill. I needed to thin the odds. Banking hard around a mountain face, I cut power suddenly, creating the illusion of a crash behind the ridgeline. It was an old trick, but it worked. Two of them broke formation to investigate, while the others continued pursuit. The game had begun, and for the first time that day, I felt a grim smile form beneath my oxygen mask. "That's right, fellows. Come and get me." I re-engaged afterburners and shot upward, the sky darkening as I climbed, sun at my back. Time to turn the tables. The sun was my ally now, blinding them as I dove from above. My first target never saw me coming. A quick burst from my cannon sent him into a defensive spiral, trailing smoke but still flying. I didn't have time to confirm the damage before the others were on me, air filled with the deadly dance of missile contrails and cannon fire. My warning systems blared as a heat seeker locked onto me. Instinct took over as I released flares and banked hard right, feeling the missile detonate harmlessly behind me. The shock wave still rocked my aircraft, sending my helmet crashing against the canopy. Blood trickled down my forehead as I regained control, but there was no time to dwell on it. "Viper 1, status report." The voice in my ear sounded distant through the ringing. "Still here, Sierra, for bandits remaining, but they've called for reinforcements." I pulled into a tight, climbing turn, watching my fuel gauge dip into the yellow. Conservation wasn't an option anymore. Survival required everything my bird had to give. I leveled out at 20,000 feet, scanning for threats, when my radar picked up two more signatures approaching from the north. The odds were getting worse. That's when an idea struck me, risky, borderline insane, but it might work. There was a narrow canyon system ahead with a reputation among pilots, the Graveyard, named for the wrecks of those who'd tried to navigate it at speed. If I could lure them in, I pitched downward, heading straight for the canyon entrance, making sure they had a clear visual on me. "Sierra Actual, I'm implementing maneuver Charlie 7. There was a pause, then, "That's negative, Viper 1. That canyon is a death trap at combat speeds." I watched as all four enemies took the bait, forming up behind me in pursuit. "With respect, sir, that's exactly what I'm counting on." I cut the communication and focused entirely on what came next. The canyon walls rose up around me, a maze of stone and shadow barely wider than my wingspan in places. Every nerve in my body fired at once, hands moving instinctively across the controls as I navigated turns that left no room for error. The first enemy jet couldn't match the turn rate and clipped a rock formation, exploding in a fireball that lit up the canyon. The second misjudged his altitude and went too low, disappearing in a cloud of debris. But the remaining two were good, too good, staying with me through every twist and dive. My fuel warning light began flashing urgently as I pushed the aircraft beyond its design limits. The canyon was about to open into a wide valley, and I'd lose my terrain advantage. I had seconds to make a decision that would determine if I lived or died. That's when I remembered something my flight instructor told me years ago. Sometimes, Parker, the craziest option is the only one that works. I cut power completely, deployed air brakes, and let physics do the impossible. My F-16 practically stopped mid-air, dropping like a stone as the pursuing jets overshot, unable to match the sudden deceleration. Time seemed to slow as they passed overhead, so close I could see the surprise in the lead pilot's eyes. In that frozen moment, I re-engaged full power and pulled the trigger, cannons blazing into the underbelly of the lead aircraft. The hit was clean, his engines erupting in flames as he lost control. His wingman tried to circle back, but misjudged his turn in the confined space, clipping the canyon wall and spiraling downward. I pulled up hard, escaping the canyon as secondary explosions echoed behind me. The skies were momentarily clear, but my aircraft was damaged, fuel critically low, and those reinforcements were still coming. I'd survived round one, but the real fight was just beginning. The missile struck without warning, my countermeasures depleted, defensive options limited. The impact shredded my right wing, sending me into an uncontrolled spin. Warning alarms screamed throughout the cockpit as smoke filled my lungs. Mayday, mayday! Viper 1 is hit. The violent motion made it nearly impossible to reach the stabilizer controls. The ground and sky traded places in a sickening carousel as I fought against G-forces threatening to black me out. Through sheer will, I managed to regain partial control, but the damage assessment was grim. Hydraulics failing, fuel leaking, right engine destroyed. The aircraft responded sluggishly to my commands, like a wounded animal struggling to stand. The two reinforcement MiGs circled above like vultures, watching me limp across the sky. They knew I was finished. It was just a matter of time. My radio crackled with their communications, translated automatically through my systems. American pilot, you fought well. Surrender your aircraft and eject. You will be treated according to Geneva Convention. I almost laughed. The same guys who've been hunting me now offered mercy? I checked my remaining systems. One working engine, enough fuel for maybe 15 minutes of flight, and a single air-to-air missile that might or might not still function. Ejection was the logical choice, but logic wasn't driving me anymore. Those soldiers at the FOB were still unaware of what was coming. I toggled my secure channel. Sierra Actual, Viper 1. Aircraft critically damaged, but still airborne. Enemy force reduced to 2 aircraft plus whatever they've got in reserve. Request permission to continue mission. The response was immediate. Negative, Viper 1. Get that bird on the ground if you can, or punch out. That's an order. I stared at the blood dripping onto my control panel, each heartbeat pulsing with a decision I'd already made. Sierra, enemy reinforcements will reach our position in under 30 minutes. No one else is close enough to intercept. I still have one good engine and one good missile. My commander's voice softened. Parker, John, your family is waiting for you to come home. I swallowed hard, hands steady despite everything. That's why I'm doing this, sir. So everyone else's family gets the same chance. With my remaining engine, I climbed laboriously, using the last of my afterburner fuel to gain altitude. The MiGs followed cautiously, clearly confused by my strategy. What they didn't know was that my NAV system had identified their airfield 20 miles east, the launching point for the planned attack on our base. Even with my crippled aircraft, I might reach it. Might be able to do some damage. The cockpit was getting colder as environmental systems failed. My breathing labored through the damaged oxygen supply. I thought about writing this would look in the official report. Pilot exceeded mission parameters. Such sterile language for what was happening. But as the airfield came into view on my targeting system, something else appeared on radar. Multiple signatures, approaching fast from the west. I squinted through my cracked canopy, not believing what I was seeing. Viper 1, this is Razor Flight. Looks like you started the party without us. 4F, 22 Raptors screamed past my position, pristine and lethal. Our delayed reinforcements had finally arrived, directly into the fight. The pursuing MiGs scattered, suddenly on the defensive as America's premier fighters engaged. My radio filled with chatter as the squadron leader ordered. Viper 1, you've done enough. Get that wounded bird home if you can. I watched in exhausted amazement as the Raptors made short work of my pursuers, then turned toward the enemy airfield. Relief flooded through me, but was quickly replaced by a new concern. I still had to get my critically damaged aircraft back across 80 miles of hostile territory, with systems failing by the minute. The hardest part of my journey might still be ahead, but for the first time since the mission began, I wasn't alone. Razor Lead, this is Viper 1. Request 1 escort for the trip home. I'm not sure my bird's going to make it without a wingman. The journey back was a nightmare of fire warnings, failing systems, and constant pain. My right arm had been injured in the missile strike, making it increasingly difficult to control the aircraft. Razor 2 stayed with me, flying close enough that I could see the concern on his face through his visor. Hang in there, Viper. 10 more minutes to friendly airspace. But my aircraft had other ideas. The engine coughed and sputtered, losing power as I limped along at barely 200 knots. The control stick grew heavier in my hand as hydraulic pressure continued to drop. Each breath brought the metallic taste of blood and smoke through my damaged oxygen system. I'd pushed the limits of what a human and machine could endure, and both were failing. Parker, level out. You're losing altitude. Razor 2's voice jolted me back to consciousness. I'd blacked out momentarily, the cumulative effect of blood loss, G-forces, and oxygen deprivation. My altimeter showed 8,000 feet and falling rapidly. I pulled back on the stick with everything I'd left, leveling the aircraft just 3,000 feet above the mountainous terrain below. The horizon tilted crazily despite my corrections. Something fundamental had given way in the flight control system. Sierra Actual, this is Razor 2. Viper 1 is in critical condition. Aircraft and pilot. Request immediate CSAR preparation and vector to nearest friendly landing zone. The response came through clearly. Understood, Razor 2. Divert to emergency strip Echo 3. Coordinates incoming. The emergency landing strip appeared on my NAV system, a rough airfield used for covert operations, just 10 miles inside friendly territory. It represented my only chance at survival, but reaching it required crossing a mountain range with peaks that now loomed dangerously close to my minimum safe altitude. My wingman dropped lower, matching my descent, close enough now that his jet wash occasionally stabilized my failing aircraft. I've got you, Parker. We're doing this together. The camaraderie of pilots transcended squadrons, ranks, everything. In that moment, he was willing to risk his $150 million aircraft to guide my broken jet home. I managed a weak thumbs up through my cracked canopy. The mountain pass approached, a narrow corridor between towering peaks. With every ounce of remaining concentration, I threaded the needle between the mountains, following the precise course Razor 2 established ahead of me. My engine sputtered again, this time losing power completely for 3 terrifying seconds before reluctantly restarting. The landing strip appeared in the distance, a crude slash of concrete in a hidden valley. No control tower, no proper runway lights, just the bare minimum needed to get wheels on the ground. My radio crackled with the voice of the base commander. Viper 1, this is Echo 3. We show you 5 miles out, losing altitude rapidly. Emergency crews standing by. You're cleared to land any way you can. I began my approach, fighting the damaged controls, struggling to maintain a glide path as warning lights illuminated every system in the cockpit. The ground rushed up to meet me, my consciousness fading in and out as I made one final call. Echo 3, Viper 1 on final approach. No hydraulics, no flaps, minimal control. Better send the crash trucks. I don't remember the landing itself, just fragments of sensation. The violent shudder as my landing gear collapsed, the screech of metal on concrete, spinning, fire, then darkness. I woke in a field hospital 3 days later, surrounded by medical equipment and the steady beeping of monitors. My body felt like one massive bruise, with my right arm immobilized and bandages covering burns across my torso. The first face I saw belonged to Colonel Matthews, my commanding officer, looking uncharacteristically emotional. Welcome back to the land of the living, Lieutenant. His voice was gruff but warm. You've been a topic of conversation at the highest levels. What you did out there? He paused, searching for words. Well, let's just say the history books will need a new chapter. The full story emerged in pieces over the following days. My actions had not only provided early warning of the impending attack, but had decimated the enemy's air capability in that sector. The 4 fighters I'd managed to eliminate represented nearly half their operational strength in the region. The reinforcements had destroyed the airfield and its remaining aircraft, effectively neutralizing the threat to our forward operating base. 200 ground troops had been spared from an attack they would have never seen coming. Intelligence later confirmed that the mission had been deemed so critical because that FOB was coordinating a major offensive set to launch just 48 hours later. If it had been destroyed, thousands of lives and months of planning would have been lost. The medal ceremony was held while I was still in a wheelchair, my burns and broken bones far from healed. Generals I'd only seen in news briefings stood at attention as the citation was read. For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy. The words washed over me as I thought not about heroism, but about the moments of pure terror, the split-second decisions, the certain knowledge that I was going to die alone in hostile airspace. Later, a senior pilot from the Raptor squadron visited my recovery room. You know what they're calling you now? The ghost of Sector 7. The enemy pilots are telling stories about an American aircraft that couldn't be shot down. He grinned. Might make our jobs easier if they're all looking over their shoulders from now on. What no one mentioned in the official reports was the cost, not just physically, but mentally. Night after night, I relived those moments in the canyon. The missile impact, the desperate flight home. The doctors called it PTSD. I called it the price of survival. My wife noticed how I flinched at loud noises, how I would wake up gasping for breath, reaching for control systems that weren't there. Recovery became my new mission, one fought not with weapons and tactics, but with therapy sessions and small daily victories. Learning to hold my daughter again with arms that had nearly been destroyed. Retraining muscles that had been pushed beyond human limits. Finding peace in a mind that had accepted death, then been unexpectedly returned to life. The hardest enemy wasn't the MiGs or the missile. It was the memory of who I'd been forced to become up there. 6 months later, I stood on the flight line, watching the squadron prepare for a training mission. My flight status was still medical hold, but the doctors were optimistic about an eventual return to the cockpit. A new pilot approached, fresh from training, eyes wide with recognition. "Lieutenant Parker? Sir, it's an honor to meet you. They teach your canyon maneuver at the academy now." I smiled politely, but my mind flashed to what they couldn't teach. The smell of your own blood filling your oxygen mask, the absolute clarity when you've accepted death, the weight of responsibility for lives beyond your own. "Just remember," I told him, my hand resting on his shoulder, "the best pilots aren't the ones who do the impossible. They're the ones who recognize when the impossible becomes necessary." He nodded earnestly, not yet understanding. As he walked away, I looked up at the clear blue sky, feeling both longing and apprehension. The question wasn't if I would fly again, but who I would be when I did. The man who entered that canyon died there in many ways. Whoever emerged was still a mystery I was solving one day at a time. The military analyst dissected every second of my flight recorder data for months. What had started as a desperate gamble became case studies in air combat tactics, pilot psychology under extreme duress, and aircraft performance beyond design specifications. They brought me in as a consultant once I could walk unassisted, asking endless questions about each decision point. What made you choose the canyon instead of attempting to outrun them to friendly airspace? At what point did you determine that continuation of the mission outweighed survival protocols? I struggled to articulate what had been instinct rather than calculation. In those moments, I finally explained to a room full of officers with more stars than I'd ever seen in one place. You're not thinking about protocols. You're thinking about the promises you've made to your country, to your fellow soldiers, to yourself. What fascinated them most was what they called situational adaptation, the ability to repurpose training for scenarios it was never intended to address. The canyon maneuver wasn't in any manual. It was born from desperation and fragments of knowledge accumulated over years. My flight instructor had once mentioned how Korean War pilots used terrain to evade superior numbers. A training exercise gone wrong had taught me how my aircraft handled at near-stall speeds. A documentary about World War II had shown how pilots used the sun to blind enemies. These disparate pieces had coalesced in those critical moments, proving that a pilot's greatest asset isn't the technology surrounding them, but the adaptable mind controlling it. The Air Force quietly revised its training programs to emphasize this type of creative problem-solving under pressure. The psychological impacts became a focus as well, not just for me, but for the entire combat aviation community. The military had long understood the physical demands of aerial combat, but my experience highlighted something more nuanced: how isolation affects decision-making. When you know you're completely alone, with no immediate backup possible, your relationship with risk fundamentally changes, I explained during a panel discussion. You stop thinking about surviving the next 5 minutes and start thinking about accomplishing whatever is necessary, regardless of personal cost. This insight led to new protocols for solo missions, improved communication systems, and enhanced psychological preparation. My suffering became a foundation for ensuring future pilots might avoid the darkest moments I'd faced. Perhaps the most profound lesson came not from the military, but from a letter I received while still in rehabilitation. It was from a mother of a soldier stationed at the forward operating base I'd helped protect. "My son tells me that if not for you, he likely wouldn't be coming home next month," she wrote. "He says everyone there knows what one pilot did, flying alone against impossible odds. I wanted you to see his face, to know who you saved." Attached was a photo of a young Marine, no more than 20, smiling beside a Humvee. That night, I showed my wife the letter as we sat on our back porch, watching the sunset. "This is why," I said quietly, the photo trembling slightly in my still recovering hands. "This is why any of it was worth it." She took my hand, understanding as only a military spouse can the weight of sacrifice and the unexpected rewards that sometimes follow. As darkness fell, I looked up at stars appearing in the evening sky, feeling a strange sense of peace. The skies had nearly killed me, yet they still called to me, a contradiction I was slowly learning to accept. The doctor's pen hovered over my medical clearance form, his expression serious. "Physically, you've made a remarkable recovery, Lieutenant Parker, but need to be certain about your psychological readiness." 15 months had passed since that fateful mission. Multiple surgeries had repaired my body, but the mind was more complicated territory. I met his gaze steadily. "I've done everything asked of me: therapy, simulations, evaluations. I'm ready." He nodded slowly, then signed the document that would allow me back into a cockpit. "Take it gradually. Your first flights will be with an instructor pilot. No solo missions for at least 3 months." I accepted the conditions without argument. After staring death in the face at 20,000 feet, patience came more easily now. Walking out of the medical building, I felt sunshine on my face and something I hadn't experienced in a long time: anticipation rather than anxiety. My first flight back was both familiar and strange, like returning to a childhood home to find everything slightly rearranged. My hands remembered the controls, my body recalled the sensations, but my mind was different. More cautious in some ways, more confident in others. The instructor beside me said little, allowing me to re-establish my relationship with the aircraft at my own pace. We flew a simple pattern, nothing demanding, yet it felt momentous. As we banked into a gentle turn, sunlight streamed through the canopy, and I found myself unexpectedly emotional. Not from fear or flashbacks, as the psychologist had warned might happen, but from profound gratitude. Second chances in combat aviation are rare. I was living a miracle with every degree of that turn, every foot of altitude, every beat of my still functioning heart. The squadron welcomed me back with the particular brand of respect pilots reserved for those who've faced the impossible. There were no grand ceremonies, just quiet acknowledgments, a nod in the briefing room, a hand on my shoulder in the mess hall, the occasional "good to have you back, Ghost." They gave me space to find my footing, to rediscover my identity as an aviator without being defined solely by those harrowing minutes over enemy territory. Gradually, my responsibilities increased. Training flights became more complex. The restricted flight status eventually lifted. 6 months after my return, I was assigned as an instructor for advanced tactical maneuvers, the Air Force's way of ensuring my hard-won knowledge wouldn't be lost. Standing before a class of eager pilots, I began not with glory stories but with humility. Aviation is unforgiving, I told them, but it's also generous with its lessons if you survive to learn them. On the anniversary of the mission, I requested and received permission for a solo flight, not in combat, but in the peaceful skies of home. As I soared through perfect blue, conducting maneuvers with a precision that had returned stronger than before, I reflected on the journey. The scars on my body had faded to silver lines. The nightmares had diminished to occasional visitors rather than nightly tormentors. I thought about the changes in doctrine my experience had inspired, the lives potentially saved by lessons written in my blood and fear. Banking the aircraft toward the setting sun, I opened the throttle and climbed, feeling the pure joy of flight that had drawn me to this path originally. Over the radio came a familiar voice, my old commander. "How's the view up there, Ghost?" I smiled behind my oxygen mask, watching the clouds pass beneath me. "Clear skies in all directions, sir." And for the first time since that fateful day, I meant it in every possible way. The mission had nearly cost me everything, but it had also given me something precious, the understanding that our greatest capabilities often lie dormant until necessity awakens them. That knowledge would stay with me through whatever challenges still waited beyond the horizon. As you've journeyed with me through this extraordinary tale of courage, skill, and determination, I hope you're feeling that same rush of inspiration that comes from witnessing the human spirit triumph against overwhelming odds. This isn't just a story about combat in the skies. It's about discovering what you're truly capable of when everything is on the line. What would you do if faced with your own impossible situation? Would you retreat to safety? Or would you find that same reservoir of courage that allowed one pilot to overcome 6 enemy fighters with a damaged aircraft and limited fuel? The truth is, most of us will never know our true capabilities until we're pushed beyond what we believe possible. Think about the moments in your own life where you've faced challenges that seemed insurmountable. Perhaps they weren't life or death situations like our pilots, but they required you to dig deeper than you thought possible. How did you respond? Did you find that same inner strength, that same clarity of purpose that comes when everything unnecessary falls away? I challenge you to carry this story with you into your daily battles. The next time you face adversity, whether in your career, relationships, or personal goals, remember the pilot alone in that canyon, making split-second decisions that would determine not just his fate, but the fate of hundreds of others. Remember that sometimes the most dangerous decision is also the only one that matters. If you found value in this extraordinary account of military courage and tactical brilliance, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with others who might need this same inspiration. Hit that subscribe button and activate notifications so you never miss another story of remarkable human achievement against impossible odds. Together, we'll continue exploring the limits of human potential and the incredible stories that remind us what we're truly capable of. What impossible situation have you overcome that you once thought would defeat you? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today.